So Steve, what is Monrovia Day or days, and how did it get started?
Okay, well, towns in the new lots in the new town of Monrovia were first offered for sale May 17th, 1886. And as May 17th of 1887 rolled around, the city fathers thought it would be a great idea to have a celebration on the 1-year anniversary of the founding. So they called for a public gathering in Barnes Hall, where there were speeches and orations. Probably William Monroe spoke, maybe General Pyle spoke. Anyway, they basically celebrated what had happened in that 1 year since May 17th of 1886. I don't know if there was any singing. There might have been a Monrovia streetcar. Anyway, they celebrated. They said it's a birthday party. And the same thing happened, as far as I know, on the same day, May 17th, in 1887, 8, 9, 90, and 91. But by May of 1892, they decided we're going to have a parade. And there are pictures of that parade which went up and down Myrtle Avenue. Actually, I think it went down only. I'm trying to think what direction the horses were headed. Anyway, they had a parade. And so there was a parade for many, many years after that. They used to have a queen contest before there was actually Monrovia Day Queen and Court, but they would have like a May Queen contest. And you vote, you get accumulated votes. I don't know whether you sold tickets or had people turn in a paper ballot. Anyway, the young woman with the highest number of votes was then May Queen or Queen of Monrovia Day. That was formalized in the early 1910s with the Queen and Court. I think the first court was about 12. Anyway, there was a very prominent Monrovia matron who used to make the claim that she was the first Monrovia Day Queen. And I can remember Myron Hotchkiss telling me privately, actually she wasn't. And then after her death, Myron said, well, now I can tell the truth about who the first Monrovia Day Queen was. Parade continued without
Well, who was the first Monrovia Day Queen?
You would ask me.
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry.
No, well, Florence. I'll have to look
Anyway, it wasn't the woman who claimed
it wasn't the lady who claimed it. And that reminds, speaking of Monrovia matrons, my family physician for many years was Dr. Al Miller, whose office was on West Foothill Boulevard. He was fairly well-known and well-regarded, and lots of patients. So the story he told me was his receptionist, without realizing it, took care of an overflow crowd in the waiting room by seating 2 of his patients in one of the observation rooms or examination rooms. What you didn't realize was that they were arch enemies. And they just sat there and glared at each other across the room. So Al Miller's comment was, when I walked into the room, you could have cut the tension with a knife. I think he probably told his receptionist, never again. Anyway, there were those strong personalities and those strong antipathies. But this lady was so sure, or wanted to believe she was the first, and was prominent enough and vociferous enough that people didn't question it, other than Myron, who knew the truth. Parade, a couple exceptions, probably notably during this, maybe the First World War or the Second World War.
What were the early parades like?
They were homegrown. I mean, you got somebody's wagon or somebody's very early car, and you lavishly decorated it with roses and green plumage, and hopped in with your finery with your family, just drove down Myrtle Avenue. Or you'd have a flatbed truck and you get a bunch of people together on the back of it and you drive that down Myrtle Avenue. Did you know Nell Bortels? Well, Nell was in Quota probably, maybe she moved before the time you became, anyway, there's this great picture of Nell and a group of others riding on the back of her Uncle Bill Bacon's flatbed truck down Myrtle Avenue is a completely homegrown. It got a little more sophisticated later, but the early ones were strictly homegrown.
I'm always struck with how well dressed the people lining the Myrtle Avenue to watch the parade are. They're in their finery.
Well, yeah, because it was a gala occasion. I mean, you dressed just like you dressed to go to church then. This is a major event. You dressed to the nines.
So that shot of the one where Julian Fisher is on the horse,
Yeah,
that was from 1911,
10 or 11, yeah.
and it's the
I mean,
horse.
the stores went all out. I mean, the city put draped bunting across the street, and stores would have bunting on the front of their storefronts. It was a big deal. And another thing in connection about 1931, Marvin Burr had the idea of having an old-timers luncheon. So he reserved the Women's Clubhouse in North Canyon, the auditorium, and they had a gathering of people who'd lived here in the early days forward. I mean, there were some people probably from the 20s, but the old-timers were considered to be those who came in the 80s and 90s. They came back to Monrovia for that event. That was a tradition for a number of years also. When they had a horse show one year. Later on, they tried soapbox derby. Carnival was a mainstay for many years. That became problematic. Was discontinued, was reintroduced on a limited basis within the last couple of years. So it's had several different manifestations, but it's at the heart of it is always to celebrate the founding of Monrovia. Queen in Court, lasted a long time tradition. That was discontinued when it became a major undertaking, more than the resources of the committee that put on the parade could comfortably handle, so that was dropped. And I think there was an element of sexism about it. Probably some guy said, well, why can't there be a king of the Monrovia Day? Well, there you have it.
So one of the pictures that we've always thought was of Monrovia Day is actually a bargain day.
Bargain Day. That year I think they did, I don't know that they did both. I think the bargain day was on May 30th, so I doubt that they would have done something on both May 17th and the 30th. They probably opted for the bargain day that year.
And what was bargain day?
When local stores offered reduced prices on their stocks. The other thing I should mention too is that at some point the tradition became to celebrate have the parade on the Saturday closest to the 17th of May rather than on the 17th of May itself. So that's been the tradition for a long, long time.
So the Centennial had a very special Monrovia Days event.
It did, and it also brought back for a one-time basis the Old Timers Luncheon, at which they presented some of the Centennial Awards.
And the red car was part of the parade.
Eleanor Hendricks headed the committee that brought a red car back to Monrovia and was in the parade. That was nice.
And there was an exhibit of orange.
In the library, there was
labels.
an exhibit of the citrus industry and early orange crate labels that gathered together lots of information from a couple different sources and put it together nicely in one place where people could enjoy it.
And someone wrote up a history of the Monrovia Days.
Mary Wilcox spent a lot of time researching early newspapers, and she went year by year and included as much information about each individual year as she was able to find.
And that's now in the Legacy Collection. People can read it online.
It is, right. One year they had a children's parade, I think it was 1923, when all the entries were children, marching up and down Myrtle Avenue, again dressed in their finest. Direction of the parade changed over the years. Sometimes it went north, sometimes south. At one point it started on West Foothill, went east on Foothill to Myrtle, and then south on Myrtle. I think there are a couple other routes explored over the years. Primarily on Myrtle Avenue, sometimes on side streets also.
Yeah, William Monroe was in it often, was he not?
He was. As long as he was in the area, he would ride in the parade. I think the last time he rode might have been 1935. He died later in 1935. I'm not absolutely sure he rode in 35, but he may have. He was living here at that time. And there's a parade picture about 1914 with William Monroe on horseback riding in the parade. Some pictures from later, probably the 20s, showing Mr. and Mrs. Monroe riding in an open car.
So I think it's in the Mary Wilcox book where she talks about how big the celebration was. And I want to say in the 50s where there were 50,000 people who came to the parade.
That's the estimate. That seems like a huge number, but
Yeah.
KTLA set out, they covered it.
And Johnny Tremaine was the
Oh, yeah. I mean, they got
Grand Marshal.
They got grand marshals to ride in it. Yeah, it was a real big hometown celebration. Monrovia's answer to the Rose Parade. Much more modest scale, but an answer nonetheless.